We're good. So
Sounds good.
Hi everyone, welcome to our session, Search Like a Pro. My name is Joanna Namath, and I'm the Instruction and Reference Librarian here at Athabasca University Library. I'm currently working on Treaty 7 territory, but we do have a physical library in the town of Athabasca, which is right on the border of Treaty 6 and Treaty 8. So we'll go ahead and get started, and feel free to post any questions you have in the chat box as we're going. So by the end of this session, you'll be able to apply the most appropriate search strategy in a variety of search tools, develop effective search strategies for a variety of search tools, and create a search strategy for your own research. So I'm sure you saw in our, when you were registering, that we had a link to this guide. We're going to kind of go through that as our mode of instruction for this session. So we'll have some activities and just work on developing your searches. And for everyone just joining, I'd love for you to introduce yourself in the chat, but if you don't feel like it, that's totally fine. Also, no pressure. So we're going to start by pointing out that the search process is non-linear. So what you want to do is start by mapping out what you want to know about your topic. And then you want to identify your key concepts. So when you're starting your search, you want to break down your search into core concepts. So ask yourself, what do I need to know about this topic to proceed? What are the main ideas I want to know about? Are there population, geographic, time criteria for my topic? What are the most and best appropriate keywords for my concept? So we're going to start with this activity just to give you an idea of how you can think about developing your search, and how other people will look at the same research question and have a totally different direction that they go with their research. So if we start out, you're looking at this image. Some people are going to see this as explore, and some people are going to really focus on, say, the rickshaw or the backpack. So our first activity is to add as many keywords, descriptions as you can to this, about this photo. So I've just sent the link in the chat. You can also post any keywords that you're coming up with in the chat, and I can add them for you. Yeah, we'll just give you a couple minutes to come up with some keywords for that. I posted it, I think, 2 days ago. I restarted the activity, so we've already got a few people coming in and adding terms like architecture and backpacking. You can also add more terms that other people have done. Like you can see Europe is done twice and exploring is done twice. Okay, so we're getting some good additional terms. We've got travel in here, tourism, sightseeing, and city. Yeah, so you can kind of get an idea of what developing your keywords can look like. And then from there, you can start to focus your research. So it's just an example and to give you some ideas of how other people will see totally different keywords when looking at the same question. So if we're to take that into actually thinking about developing our research, we've got some examples here. So the first research question we use is whether people are more likely to stay in their jobs if they have access to professional development. So here you can see we separated our search into engagement or participation, professional development, and then some synonymous terms for that, and retention. Example 2, we're going to use for some brainstorming a little bit later on, but you can see the basic question is how teens' mental health is affected by e-learning. So we've got various terms for youth, teen, Young adult might be another one we want to add, depending on the age range we want to go with. There might be more terms there. Obviously, there's tons of terms for online learning, which I'll also get you to add a few to. And then mental health. And of course, there's lots more terms for mental health. So we'll get into those as we go on. So I started this one probably 6 months ago, so people can come in and do this course at any point and add terms, and you can see all of the different terms we've got for online learning here. So I'll add a link into the chat here, and you can add any more you think of, or up more, make any of them larger that you were planning to add in. Like I don't think, yeah, we've got asynchronous learning once, virtual learning. We might want to do asynchronous education. And I feel like because we're all doing e-learning, we've got, everyone has their own opinion about other terms to use for that. Give you a bit of time to add in any you want, and then we'll continue on. Yeah, so we've got modern classroom, independent learning, flexible learning, independent learning spelled differently. It's a really good point to show that there are different spellings for a lot of these words. Pandemic learning, blind learning, self-taught, online, rural, far. Those are all really good starts. So now we'll go through how your research process will usually go. So what you do is start out with an idea. The example I've had a few questions of recently is students will contact me and ask for 5 peer-reviewed articles on Rome, something super broad like that. So what you want to do is start thinking about, you're not going to be able to write a whole paper on the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. So you're going to have to limit your research to, you know, maybe a particular time period, maybe something about that time period. So what you'll do is start browsing. This is not for anything to do with citing your papers, but you can start with maybe looking at Google and Wikipedia. We also have a list of encyclopedias within the library of e-encyclopedias you can use. So going through some of those to see, just to get some ideas, just to get the basics of what there is about your topic. You can take out a couple books that will broadly talk about it. And then you can kind of start to decide on an area you might want to focus your research. You might want to look at like women in the Hellenistic period or Christianity under Constantine. Once your course is set, you can head to the library and start doing some research. I think in this one, I also wanted to add, you can start to come up with some terms that you might want to use. So then you can start trying out some research questions, some research statements. Try modifying your search. You might come up with different keywords as you're searching. And then you'll need to refine, pause, observe, consider, repeat. Try out different search tools. We have a lot of subject guides. These are open to anyone, so anyone can take a look at them that provide ideas on databases to use. And keep searching. If you want to write in what departments you're coming from, like what areas of research you're doing, I'd love to see that, because then I can show you some of the guides that we've got for those and some databases we might want to use, we can demo with. And if you get stuck on anything, there are librarians that can help you with your research projects. So even if you just send us your research question, even if you do send us something like, I'm looking for research on Rome and I need 6 peer-reviewed articles, we won't send you those peer-reviewed articles, but we'll help you figure out your search and come up with ways to find those articles. Seems like a quiet bunch today. Well, I tried to pick topics that would be somewhat interdisciplinary because I wasn't sure where you were all coming from. So hopefully you like them, but if you want to write in your research topics, I'd love to hear those. All right, so now we're going to get into Boolean operators. So Boolean operators are and, or, and not. Those are what we're going to use to connect our subject terms together to develop our keywords. And I usually start with or. So or is what we're going to use to broaden our search, and we use it to connect synonymous terms together. So some examples we've got here, like pediatric or child, vaccination or immunization, city or urban. I was going to show you one other guide that has just some simpler ways to think about getting your head around Boolean operators. Okay, so here you can see the dark line. When we're using or, we're searching for everything about evolution, everything about phobias, and things that are about both evolution and phobias. And on the other hand, is going to limit your search and help you focus. So using and with youth and learning and motivation is going to search for this center blue triangle. And our last Boolean operator is not. So what we can use not for is for limiting out search terms that you might not want in your search. So the example we have in here is that if you're looking for information about rape culture, if you're doing some gender studies research and you're looking on an interdisciplinary database, you might keep getting research about canola. But that's just because canola is also known as rapeseed, and sometimes the cultivars are called rape culture. So it would be reasonable to use not canola in that example. But you do want to be careful because you will be limiting out some research that is potentially relevant to your topic. So it's a tricky one to do. The other one I like to use is if you're doing research on the PEPA framework and you keep getting information on Peppa the Pig, which is a popular children's thing, you could use not pig to limit out the pig research that you don't want in your research. Okay, so I'm not sure how this activity will work, but we'll see if anyone feels like interacting. So what we're going to do here is just to make sure you have the right idea of how the Boolean operators work. I'm going to list out a term, and in the chat you can say if you'll use or and between these two terms. So if we start out with cure treatment, would you use or and to connect those terms? Are those synonymous terms or not? Okay, we've got two ors there. Thank you. Correct. And nutrition hospital. And good job. Arts confidence. We've got another and there. Good job. Diet nutrition. 4. Good job. Wetlands, species at risk. And dog canine. 4. Death coping. 4. All right. It is actually and, because I mean, they could, depending on your research topic, you might want to use or for those, but for the most part, you're going to be researching, in these examples, you're going to be researching information about coping with death. So you want articles that talk about both death and coping. Housing insecure, homeless. 4, all right. Good job. University post-secondary. All right, got some more ors there. Good job. Pet therapy. All right. I mean, you could say, I mean, I personally feel like pets are therapy, but it is and. All right. So now that we've come up with that, what I wanted to go to next was to work on developing our search strings. So we start out with this topic. What effect does online learning have on mental health of youth? What I was hoping we could do is brainstorm some keywords, and then we'll use that for searching for the rest of our activity. So I'm going to share this Jamboard with you. And the idea is you just add in a sticky note, and you can add in as many terms as you like, one term per sticky note. So we might want to add in virtual learning. And so we can have each in different sections. So for youth, we might want to do young adults. You can slide it over here. So I've added the Jamboard link in there, and that's just to do some brainstorming. I'm going to try and keep track of the ones you're adding so that we can use those for our search. I'll probably miss some, but we'll see how much brainstorming we can get done. Also, if you don't want to use the Jamboard or you don't want to have multiple screens open, you can totally just write in terms in the chat and I can add them in for you. I understand not everyone has like multiple screen capabilities. Boolean operators don't work in all search engines as far as I know. I think like places like Google, they don't work very well in. I was actually just trying some the other day, like I was searching in the library and I was like, oh, I'll see what comes up on Google, and they didn't really seem to work the same way. So it's really like a library database thing. Okay, we've got some good terms coming in. Yeah, mental health is a tricky one. I did this search with a different group and they came up with lots of like wellness terms, and I was like, that's a fair direction to go. But depression is a really good one that I haven't seen come up with before too, so that's awesome. I'm gonna add that one in. Okay, so we've got a few in here. So if we're to use Boolean operators for these, our ands are going to go between our three main areas that we're trying to come up with synonymous terms for. So ands, and then we'd use ors between our related concepts. Just to give you an idea, and I see you're still coming up with some more terms. Virtual environment's a good one. I didn't have that one ready. Okay. So now we'll quickly go over some of the advanced search strategies. So truncation is going to allow for different varieties in suffixes. So it can be really useful. You can see if we use advoca, we'll get advocate, advocates, advocating, advocacy. Communicate will come up with communication, communicating, etc. I did notice this one we have constructee here, which, you know, this person's looking for research about constructivism. So that's all useful, but this is also going to be able to search terms for construction, which might not be what we're looking for. The other example I like to give to be cautious with truncation and make sure to use as far at the end of the root of the word you can is, I was doing research on cyber trolling. So I had troll with a star at the end, this little asterisk here. And it meant that I got research on the mystical variety of trolls, trolleys, Anthony Trollope, and maybe even some stuff on Trollocs. A wildcard, you do want to be careful. Once you go into a library database, they'll have a help section. So I'll show you that once we get into psych info, that will show the different rules for which codes to use for which items. So you can see for a wildcard, the asterisks here, or sorry, the hashtag here will work for adding an optional character. So that helps with searching for things that might have an extra letter, like the pediatric example we're doing here, where you want to search for both pediatric with the E and the AE spelling. The question mark can be really useful for women because we've got a middle of the word variety of spellings. So the plural, the singular, and the wider variety. And then you can see here we've got different examples for headstone that, you know, headphone might not be what we want, so you want to be careful with that one. Proximity is another really important one. This one will be like if you don't necessarily want to search terms together, because you might do like, I want them to be in the same sentence, they need to be related to each other, but they might not be right beside each other. It just broadens your search quite a bit. So here we've got like incarcerate and use and all the various keywords that relate to these within 5 letters of each other. So that's the proximity limiters. And subject headings, I'll show you a little bit, but just going to go into the library. If you go up here to find resources and find resources again, that takes you into our list of databases. So I was going to show you PsycInfo. So different databases will have these really great medical subject headings that can be super useful. Not medical, some of them are medical. In this case, it's a psychological index of terms. But the example I like to give for this one is if we're searching for manic depression, and we're noticing we're like not getting a lot of research on this after say 2000. So I'm like, what's going on? Why am I not getting anything? You can search in the thesaurus, and you can see when I search manic depression, the term that comes up is bipolar disorder, and it says to use bipolar disorder. So I can click on it for more information. And sure enough, it says that in 2001, bipolar disorder replaced manic depression. And you can see manic depression took over from 1988. And before that, it was depressive psychosis. So it's a really good place to check if you're, especially if you're getting stuck on years, but it can also help you because it'll show you broader, narrower related terms. So that can really help with your research. Like maybe you want to add in a few on like affective psychosis, that type of thing. And I'll show you once we're doing our search. Actually, I was going to do our search in the main search box, but I'll show you once we're doing our search where else you can find subject terms that will help develop your search. So I'm going to put in our search terms that we came up with in our Jamboard there. So you can see I've got ors linking these terms together, and I've got ands between each line. And this is just in the advanced search. Most advanced searches in different databases will have various lines. And I'm just going to search that to show you what that looks like. So most libraries will have an EBSCO database, and that's what we're using here. And a lot of the big databases kind of function the same way, where we've got limiters on the left here. So if you limit to full text, that's going to limit to only articles that are directly PDF accessible through this database, which doesn't mean it will limit out a lot of research that you might be able to find that the library has access to or that you should be using for your research, but you might need to get by Interlibrary Loan or something. So it's a good quick way if you just need to grab a couple articles, you just want the PDFs, but we don't recommend it, especially for more advanced research. You can limit to scholarly peer-reviewed articles. If you are required to be using peer-reviewed articles, you can double check how to use those, and I'll show you where you can find out how to check for that as well. And the catalog. So in this case, we're searching our like one search, or our discover search is what we call it. So this is searching a lot of our databases as well as our library catalog. So you could limit to, the catalog would be books, ebooks, DVDs, materials, course materials, I guess, anything that we like physically have or that we own. So typically not articles. You can also limit to time period over here. The other things I'll just show you that are important to know are it can be really good to journal your search. We'll talk about that more in, I think, the 3rd session, which is on keeping organized as you search. But you can see your search string here if you go into search history. I would recommend just copying that into a document so you have access to it, especially if you're trying out a lot of different searches and you're like, what did I do to get back to this? It will stay here while you're searching, but if you take a break, it will time out. So that can be really frustrating if you go for lunch and then come back and they're not there. So it's always good to keep track of those. You can also add items to your folder. A lot of the databases have these. The problem with them is if you're not signed in, they go into a folder that will time out as well. If you want to create an account, you can, and then you can add them to your folder that way. The problem is you're probably going to be searching on lots of different vendor databases. So this is EBSCO, you'd have to make one in EBSCO, you'd have to make one in ProQuest, etc. So it can be a little bit tricky to do that. So it can be a little frustrating, I would say. So if you are interested in doing something like that, I would recommend using one of the reference management softwares like Zotero or Mendeley, and we will be doing a session on that in February. So that can be a better place to do that type of research. And if you want to just come back to this search results page, this link doesn't work. So it will time out. It's really frustrating. So what you can do is create a permalink by pressing share and copying that link into your results page. Into whatever document, not your results page, into whatever document you're interested in using. But the other thing I was going to point out to you is once you find an article that's relevant, you can take a look at the subject terms here. And we'll go a little bit more into that as we continue on. All right, so another thing that we get asked about a lot is that people are looking for research and they need to find literature reviews on their topic or systematic reviews or original research. Maybe they need to find like scientific findings. In that case, there's a couple of different ways to go about that. You can see here that you can select publication type. This depends on the database you're in, but a lot of them will, especially subject-specific ones, will have a publication type limiter that you can go through. I was going to show you if I still have Cite Info open. You can try putting our search in Cite Info and see if it works, and then I can show you. So down here in methodology, you can see we've got various different types of methodologies you can use to limit to. Literature review, systematic review, meta-analysis, as well as interview, focus group, field study, empirical study. So those can be really, really useful and are often required in your assignments. And you can see we've got EBSCO's Medline here and their example of publication type. And in ProQuest, you can see we've got document type and you can select a literature review. But the other thing you can do is you can add it into your search specifically. So you can see here we've got mental health. This doesn't zoom in at all, but mental health and youth and literature review and systematic review. In this one, we've got and focus group. The other thing you can do is beside the select a field option, you can select abstract is usually the best one to do. Sometimes I just do method with a star beside it because any articles that are going to list the methodology in the abstract are going to be very scientific and explain all of that. So that can be a good limiter as well. Feel free to ask questions as we're going as well. So as I showed you with, you can take a look at subject headings. We're going to talk a bit about pearl growing and snowballing. They sound a bit silly, but they can be really useful, especially if you're having trouble finding research on your topic. If you only found a couple articles that are relevant, what we recommend is taking a look at the reference list. You can see who's cited in the item. Are there articles, chapters, books that you might want to try and track down? I'll show you some information on tracking those down as well. You can also see what terms are being used. So that's where using some of these subject terms, you can even be like, oh, maybe I want to use virtual reality from the title and the abstract. That can be another really useful place to pull up some terms that you might want to use to develop your research, improve your research. You can also look at who cited the item and who it's cited by. So that can be really useful. And you can check out the journal that it's published in, or if it's a book chapter, you could check out the book that it's published in. So this is the same in most libraries, but I'll just show you a quick overview of finding articles if you have the citation. All right, so we're going to take a look at this article and see if we can find it. So can anyone tell me the title of the article we're looking at here? You can type it in the chat box. We get a lot of confusion between these, so I like to be really clear about that. But if no one feels like participating, I can tell you also. Okay, since no one's typing, the title of the article is Gender Differences in Academic Efficacy Across STEM Fields. So the first thing you can do, you're just looking at a reference list, is go into the EBSCO Discover search, your one search, just try searching it there. And you can see it looks like we got it here. Sometimes you'll have to put quotations around the search or select title if it's quite a common title. And in this case, we got it. You can see we got some really good subject terms, etc. Over here, you can see we've got the full text. I'll also just note that there's the cite and the permalink. This will take you back to this page, and the cite you can copy and paste into your document so that you have access if you need to try and find this again. So if we go over to full text, that should take you to the PDF. In this case, this is an EBSCO database, but it's linking to Sage. Sometimes errors will come in because those vendors don't always work super well together. So if this wasn't working, that's when we can go on to step 2. And you can see we did get into it. But if we didn't, if something was not working, the next thing we would do is go into find the journal title. So in this case, our journal title is Sociological Perspectives, and that's where a lot of students get confused because they think the journal title would be the article title. Makes sense. So we're going to go over to the third tab here, which is the journal title search. And search Sociological Perspectives. You can see that we got a lot of different databases that have it in different years. So this is a good example because you can see these last two are the only ones that go to present, and we're looking for 2022, volume 65, issue 3. So either of these should work. So I'm going to scroll into one of those. And volume 65, issue 3, and we're looking for page 555. Which is here. You can see this is also an open access article, so we could have just searched it in Google Scholar as well. So that's often a good place to check. I think in our list, we have Google Scholar second. If you want to set up library links to Google Scholar, we've got instructions on how to do that here. And then it will directly link to some of the library links, which can be really helpful if you just are not sure where to look for something, but you really need the PDF of it. Sorry, lost my spot. And if none of those work, you can always order an interlibrary loan. They're usually really fast. The only time they're really slow is if we're not really slow, but might take a week or so, is if we're waiting for another library to scan something that's never been digitized. So interlibrary loans is another really great way to go about finding the articles you're looking for. And it's always good to start ahead of time. So now we'll talk about the cited by feature. So various databases have a cited by feature. So you can see in Google Scholar, they're listed here. You can see this one cited 12 times, this one cited 1,800 times, which makes you be like, okay, this one's probably a more popular article, which is probably true, but it was also published a lot earlier than this one, 18 years earlier. So that's another area to think about. How much has the research changed since this article was published? All of that can be important when you're debating what topics or which articles to use. You can also look at what the cited bys are. You're going to get a list of them, and some of the areas that might be important are a lot of them disproving the article they're citing and being like, oh, there's new research. This isn't what we're looking for. You can see if you go into Web of Science, they also have a citations link, which will show you where these have been cited, and Scopus also does. Now, the important thing to point out here is that these are only showing who cited these within their database. So other articles that have been indexed in that database, that's not every time it's been cited. And if you keep in mind, like student papers also that maybe aren't published, it can be a little bit harder to tell, but that's something that can be useful to see. So now we'll get into where to search. So as you're working on your research, what type of sources have you needed? I'm just adding a link in here, and you can just select the plus sign and add in, maybe you need early diaries of settlers, or newspaper articles, maybe historical newspaper articles. So you can go ahead and add in any that you're thinking of, and I can make sure to go through those if you add some in, and you can also press like if you were going to add that as well. Another common one is peer-reviewed articles. All right, so the important thing to note is where you can go about finding these types of research. Usually you're going to be required to find peer-reviewed papers for different research you're doing. And peer-reviewed papers are great. They are considered the highest quality of academic research. So most databases are going to have a limiter for peer-reviewed articles. And you can also check if an article is peer-reviewed using the instructions here and going into Ulrichs is the database we usually use for that. There's a few other ways we talk about in the paper, in the guide as well. But what you want to keep in mind is, like, just because something's peer-reviewed, just because you're required to use peer-reviewed articles doesn't mean you have to only use peer-reviewed articles. You can use the required number and then also pull in maybe some trade journals, maybe some community voices. You want to keep in mind that peer-reviewed articles will leave out various voices that aren't the typical academic voices. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. For academic journals, not all academic journals are peer-reviewed, so it's going to be a wider variety if you take a look at academic journals. And this is actually an old image. This one is now limited to peer-reviewed articles, but there are various links, limiters you can use to search for academic journals. It looks like PsycInfo doesn't have it, but I know that Discover does for sure. So a lot of the one searches will have that. I know ProQuest does as well. So works by professionals can be another really good area to pull in some research. So that's going to be conference proceedings, journal articles, in trade papers, magazine articles, even blog posts from professional organizations or individuals in a profession. So these can be trickier to find. You can see that there's some areas within our subject-specific databases, and you can also take a look, like start delving into professional organizations in the areas that you're researching. Books can be another really good way to go about that. So that's where you can use the AU Library Catalog only limiter. And these will usually provide kind of a broader perspective on a topic. You're just getting a lot of information. So that can be a good place to start for some topics. For community voices, that can include memoirs, blog posts, interviews, social media, even newspaper interviews, that type of thing. We have some examples in our Black voices, intersectional feminist voices, and Indigenous voices that can give you some ideas. There's some podcasts, there's some areas that faculty have recommended taking a look at in those topics. Data and statistics. So a lot of people will approach me and be like, oh, I need data on this. And I'm not super data literate. So I always kind of check in and be like, do you really want raw data, or do you want research that's explaining the data to you? And that's where there's quite a few different places to go for that. So if we take a look back at our Find Resources, our database list, over here on the left, you can limit to data and statistics. StatCan can be a really good place to take a look at, but there's also quite a few other databases that will explain what areas they provide research in that can be really good places to start. And a lot of these are open access. They're not all research that we have subscriptions to, so they can be great. Primary research is another one we get lots of questions about. So primary research can kind of go in two directions. For more of the science fields, it can mean original research like experimentation rather than just speculation or discussion on that research. but it can also mean firsthand accounts, which is something we see more in the history departments. So if you are interested in the history ones, you can just select type over here as well. You go into primary documents, and you can see there's a lot of very specific primary document databases that can be super awesome. Some of the archive ones are going to be quite a bit broader, but that can be a really good place, like British and Irish women's letters and diaries. I'm always really excited when I get a research question that gets to use that because it's so specific, but it's always a really good bolster for research. And theses and dissertations. As you see here, we've got various open institutional repositories, but we also have a list that is in the same place as these other ones. Theses and dissertations. So D theses is one from AU, so you can look at AU published theses. And then ProQuest dissertation and theses is probably the biggest, most commonly used database for that. That can be really good if you're also, it's a really good area for Perl growing as well, because that's where you can, they'll have a very advanced list of references that you can take a look at. And they're usually very in-depth, so that's a really good one. So I guess that's the basics of our search. I left some time for questions at the end. I will point out what our search tabs do here, and feel free to put questions in the chat as we're finishing up. So the Discover search, as I said, searches a lot of our databases as well as our library catalog. So that's the books, ebooks, DVDs we own. The Scholarly Articles search is the Discover search with Scholarly Articles Limited. The journal title search we went over, but that's for looking for particular journals, and then you can see access at different years. And additional resources is our library catalog. So I can show you how that one works, but it's a little bit old school. So it's best if you already know the title of the book you're looking for, and then you can search it. And you can see we're back in this very old school database, and you can select it here and then either take a look at it as an ebook or request it and it will be mailed to you. It doesn't work super well for keyword searching, so I don't recommend it. I recommend using the Discover with the AU Library Catalog Limited if you're interested in that. And then Find Resources, once again, is where you can go to find resources and our library database list. All right, so if you have any specific questions, if you're working on research that you want to get some demos on or work through, we can totally do that. We also offer live bookings, or you can email us with your research question that you're struggling with, and we can work through it with you. So I'm here if you have any questions. Sorry, my library phone just started ringing, so I'm not sure why. Oh, I'm glad that it was helpful for you. And yeah, you can email us at any point and we're happy to help. I'll give you the library email. Actually, I'll share my screen and show you the contact information. All right, so if you go to the library, you can go to About AU Library and Contact Us, and that will give you all the information about contacting us. Frequently asked questions might also help you answer some of the questions you've got, and our guides, tutorials, and webinars goes through. The special topics is where we've got our short courses, like the Search Like a Pro one we used today. We also have a new literature review one we'll be going over next week. I think it's at the same time, and you've got your subject areas guides here. So if you're, say, doing nursing, you can see we've got our recommended database list, which is a really good place to go if you're just like, which databases should I use for this?
Wonderful. Thanks so much for today, Joanna. I did want to throw in the chat here in case you haven't registered yet. This is our next session. So this is next week on the 18th, which is Wednesday. Same time, same place. So this is session 2, which is the introduction to literature reviews. So you'll want to register for this if you haven't yet. And yeah, I'd just like to thank you, Joanna, for today. It was very helpful. And again, this was recorded today. If you check back in the chat, you'll actually have access to the recording so you can review any of the information that was gone over today. So thanks everyone for coming out, and I hope everyone has a lovely rest of your day, and take care.